Under the glare of courtroom lights and an audience of cameras, former congressional candidate and conservative media figure Karoline Leavitt sat stiffly at the defense table, her jaw clenched, hands curled into a white-knuckled grip. It had been 7 months since her infamous on-air tirade against Representative Jasmine Crockett. 7 months since she had smugly declared, "This country doesn't belong to you, and if you hate it so much, maybe go back to Africa." The fallout was swift: condemnation, boycotts, protests outside her media appearances. But nothing could have prepared her for the $100 million defamation and incitement lawsuit filed by Crockett, which alleged intentional emotional distress, reputational damage, and an incitement of threats that had endangered the Congresswoman's life. Leavitt's legal team had scoffed at first, until they realized how much evidence there was. Death threats, swatting attempts, cyber harassment, all traced back to the broadcast and its amplification by fringe networks. Now, with the courtroom packed and every media outlet from CNN to Fox circling like vultures, Karoline wasn't just facing legal consequences. She was facing something she had never encountered before: the limits of her power. Jasmine Crockett entered the courtroom. Without a word, draped in a dark navy suit that seemed to absorb the fluorescent light. Her legal team, composed of civil rights heavyweights and media-savvy tacticians, followed close behind. Karoline looked up briefly as Jasmine passed her, expecting defiance, perhaps even a glare, but instead found herself facing something much worse: indifference. Jasmine didn't flinch, didn't pause, didn't even acknowledge her. For someone used to sparring in the arena of rhetoric and TV shoutfests, the cold silence was deafening. The trial began with a brutal opening argument from Crockett's lead counsel, who laid out the cascading damage caused by Karoline's words. How they weren't just offensive but incendiary, deliberately timed and knowingly amplified for profit. As screenshots of hate messages flooded the courtroom screens, as audio of threats played, Karoline's face began to crumble. For the first time, she saw what Jasmine had faced: not just political opposition, but existential threat. And when Jasmine finally took the stand, it wasn't anger she brought, it was clarity. "This isn't about money," she said plainly. "It's about whether there is a line in this country for how far a white woman can go to silence a black one." Karoline's defense strategy quickly unraveled. Her lawyers tried to pivot to free speech arguments, painting her as a commentator engaged in cultural critique. But under cross-examination, Karoline was grilled about her repeated refusals to retract the statement, about her monetization of outrage, about the fundraising emails she'd sent hours after the clip went viral. "You weren't sorry, you were opportunistic," Crockett's attorney said flatly. "This wasn't a gaffe. It was a strategy." The jury watched, silent, as Karoline shifted uncomfortably. Then came the leak. A former producer from Karoline's media team, subpoenaed, and visibly shaken, admitted under oath that the rant had been planned in advance, that Karoline had rehearsed it. "She said Crockett would go nuclear and we'd get weeks of content." The courtroom gasped. Even Karoline's own lawyers looked stunned. And then Karoline broke, not with a sudden outburst, but a slow, involuntary unraveling. Her eyes welled, her voice cracked. "I didn't think she'd be in danger," she whispered during testimony. I didn't think anyone would try to kill her." It was the first time she had acknowledged the violence her words summoned. And in that moment, she wasn't the polished firebrand anymore. She was just a woman cornered by her own reflection. The final day of the trial arrived like the last, breath before a storm. The courtroom was tense, brittle with anticipation. Jasmine stood to deliver her closing remarks, a rare move for a plaintiff, but the judge had permitted it. "This isn't about silencing speech," she said, her voice even. "It's about the right not to be silenced by fear." She turned to Karoline directly. "You don't get to detonate a bomb and walk away from the rubble." Then she walked out, No mic drop, no dramatic pause, just a simple, decisive exit. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Leavitt was liable. Damages awarded, $100 million. Karoline's mouth fell open. Her hands trembled. Her team sat frozen. As the reporters swarmed the steps outside, Jasmine didn't appear. Instead, she released a written statement. Let this be a warning, not just to Karoline, but to every pundit, every politician, every profiteer of hate speech. We are not going back anywhere, least of all to silence. Later that night, a junior staffer at the courthouse swore they saw Karoline sitting alone in the back hallway, heels off, mascara streaked, whispering to herself, I didn't mean for it to go this far, but it had. And America had watched it happen. The media frenzy didn't dissipate, it metastasized. Karoline Leavitt's name trended for days, but this time not with celebration or defiant applause. This time it was pity, disgust, and the occasional stunned silence from even her fiercest allies. Conservative anchors tried to spin the verdict as a First Amendment travesty, but many visibly struggled with the details emerging from trial transcripts. The coordinated messaging, the fundraising emails, the ghoulish delight in Jasmine Crockett's fury. Even Fox News issued a tepid statement distancing themselves from her personal remarks. Karoline, once groomed as the sharp-tongued Gen Z champion of hard-right politics, had become a liability. Appearances were canceled. Sponsors pulled deals. Donors went quiet. Her book deal was suspended pending legal review. She gave a single, highly orchestrated interview days after the verdict, where she sat, hands folded, whispering, I didn't realize what my words could cost, but now I do. It was a performance more than a reckoning. The public saw through it. Memes of her tear-streaked face flooded TikTok with captions like, breaking accountability cited in wild, and when clout chasing costs 9 figures. But under all the mockery, a darker undercurrent brewed. What did it mean that so many people had supported her in the first place? For Jasmine Crockett, the victory was not celebration. It was vindication laced with exhaustion. She continued her work on the Hill with increased security and a warier heart. Her team shielded her from the worst of the vitriol that still lingered online, though Jasmine remained acutely aware of it. This isn't over, she said quietly one night in her office. It's never really over. She used the settlement funds, not for personal gain, but to launch the Crockett Institute for Media Accountability and Political Safety, a nonprofit aimed at legally challenging incitement and defamation against elected officials, particularly women of color. The announcement drew both praise and fury. Some accused her of trying to police speech. Others called her a hero in heels. But Jasmine ignored both. She didn't want a pedestal. She wanted reform. At her first press conference after the verdict, she spoke slowly, deliberately. Let's be clear, this was never about punishing Karoline Leavitt. It was about confronting the lie that public platforms come without public responsibility. When asked if she would ever speak to Karoline again, Jasmine hesitated. If she came to listen, maybe, but I'm done being a lesson for white women to learn on national television. Karoline did try, once. She requested a private meeting through a mutual contact, asking to speak off the record. Jasmine declined. She didn't need to see tears again or hear a new version of an apology crafted by PR consultants. She needed space. But what she didn't expect was the letter. Delivered quietly to her congressional office weeks later, it was handwritten, like the first, but raw. They all left, it began. Not just the donors, not just the TV execs, the people I thought were friends. The people who cheered when I said it, they vanished. She went on to describe sleepless nights, panic attacks, and her own reckoning with the parts of herself she could no longer explain away. "I don't expect forgiveness," she wrote. "But I see now how I let hate pay my bills. I don't want that anymore." Jasmine read it once, then again, then placed it, quietly, into a locked drawer. She didn't respond. Not out of malice, but out of clarity. Some truths didn't need closure. They needed boundaries. On a chilly evening 6 months after the verdict, Jasmine stepped onto the floor of the house once again. The chamber was half full, most members distracted or chatting in the back. She stood, adjusted the mic, and spoke into the record. There are moments in American history when we must decide who we are allowed to be, how far we're willing to go to prove our humanity to people determined not to see it. She paused. "But I'm done proving." She submitted a resolution proposing formal censure for any elected official found to incite targeted harassment based on race, gender, or identity, codifying for the first time that representation came with protections. The room quieted. Even her critics listened. After she finished, she turned from the podium. In the far gallery, Karoline sat quietly, dressed in gray. No cameras, no entourage. Just watching. Jasmine didn't stop. She didn't wave. She didn't nod. She walked straight out the chamber doors, heels clicking on marble, the sound echoing like a drumbeat behind her. Outside, the air was brisk. Jasmine inhaled deeply, then exhaled with something close to peace. Not victory. Not forgiveness. Just motion.